Juniors is a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game made by darroc on gamejolt. It's a really cool spin on Scott's sit and survive gameplay. It's also free, so you can go check it out yourself. But let's get past that and let's see what makes the game so good. So let's go over it bit by bit. When we load up the game, first we get two options: jump straight into it or go over the basics. First option will, like it says, throw you in the game without any explanation. The other one will show us this cool little sequence explaining the game's mechanics with dolls rather than giant murderous animatronics. Our objective is to find which one of the animatronics is possessed and mark them. We have to do this multiple times each night, but that's not all. While we are searching for the possessed one, the animatronic's stability will slowly drop. It goes from 99 to 0, and if it reaches 0, we die. Shocker, I know. However, we aren't on a strict time limit because of this. You can call in the freak shows for repair, and this comes with its own catch. If you accidentally call in the possessed animatronic, again, we will die. Okay, so those are the basic mechanics. Now let's get into the actual game. We begin on a cutscene. Our protagonist says he feels weird and questions if he is actually dead. Then we hear a sound and a small man dressed in a Fredbear costume shows up. This boots us into what I like to call a limbo section. You'll understand why. We walk for a short while in this weird land with a brain at the top and a single tree surrounded by a bunch of Fazbear memorabilia. And waiting there is the Fredbear guy. He introduces himself as Paul Bear, tells us we are in the Barrens, which is a limbo between life and death. He wants our help with something in the real world and says he will help us with our investigation of juniors in return. Finally, we're booted into the gameplay. On the first night, not much is complicated. We have to find a possessed animatronic 2 different times before we leave. Paul Bear also leaves us a tip saying, "Hey bud, for tonight, look out for the flickering lights on the camera system." This is how the game introduces us to new mechanics. The first night, all we have to look for is the said lights, which signify possessed animatronics in the room we are watching. This also seems like a good time to go over the animatronics present in the game. We have 6 in total: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, Balloon Baby, and the Marionette. First 4, aka the originals, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, work in the exact same way. They move from camera to camera, and where you spot an anomaly while they're in the room, it means they are possessed. Each has their own path, but they work in the same way. Once you find them, you mark. For Balloon Baby, they're not visible on the cameras, but rather their stability will start spazzing out on the call tablet screen, and if you see this, it is them. Balloon Baby is possessed. Finally, the Marionette, which is probably the most difficult one in my humble opinion. It can't be seen on the cameras normally, but it can be found. When we have our monitor up, it'll play a music cue in the room. And this is how we know where it is. In the room that plays the music, if there are anomalies, that means it is the Marionette. So mark her and continue. We beat the first night and move on to Again, we go to a limbo section where Paul Bear basically tells us he lied, that he can't leave, and he needs our help. Our MC isn't so keen just yet, but Paul Bear explains how he wants to leave the Barrens, but she won't let him. We realize that he is talking about the ghost. So the ghost we're trying to locate, who's possessing all the animatronics, is dangerous according to him. Then the night starts. Again, same rotation, except this night we need to locate 3 possessions, and Paul Bear warns us about the lights and handprints. These are the most iffy mechanic in the game. Handprints will appear on the camera after an animatronic leaves the room, but now when they enter, so this can lead to a bunch of confusion. Also, all 6 can leave them, even Balloon Baby, who you can't see on the camera, and the marionette. After the night, we find a tape, which of course we watch, and it's an old claymation cartoon that shows Freddy bringing an arm to a room labeled the Mangle. After that, we continue to for the next night, tell Paul Bear what we saw on the tape and conclude the ghost is building a body out of different parts, a mangle of parts, so to speak. This night, alongside the flashing and handprints, the cameras can also move on their own, which also signals possession. Quota is 5. After the night, again, we find a tape, and on it we see Freddy and Bonnie chilling at a table, assembling a mangle drawing, which I think is supposed to be a blueprint, and after that Bonnie takes another part to the mangle door and prompts the beginning of This night we go to find Paul Bear, but he is not there. Check the treehouse to find him thinking about things. He thinks the ghost is onto him, but he also suggests that after the next night, we invade the basement and take him by surprise. He also calls us his only friend. This night we are on our own with an additional mechanic introduced. Firstly, new gimmick is that the animatronics on camera can disable said camera. If you can't find an animatronic anywhere and there's a disabled camera, they're probably behind it, so mark them and move on. We also unlock the help button. Paul Bear will once a night narrow a choice down to 2 animatronics to make it easier. This can make it easier if you're short on stability and close to finishing the night, or if you're just unsure and don't want to lose your progress. The quota is 6. After we finish the night, we find another tape on which Chica gets possessed and carries a part to the mangle door. The tape then glitches out and shows us what we presume is the mangle powering up, and then we begin. We plan our invasion for Saturday with Paul Bear and set off to finish our investigation. The night's quota is 7. All previous mechanics apply, but there's just a little bit more movement by the animatronics. Find the last tape and it shows Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica sacrificing themselves to what we presume is the mangle. We say goodbye to Paul Bear after he gives us the instructions to get to the basement and says how we should dispose of Mangle. Juniors ends tonight. Okay, so the final night. This one's a doozy. Going back to the Five Nights at Freddy's sit and survive style of gameplay without an objective. All the mechanics are basically reskins ripped straight from FNAF 2 with added difficulty. All the animatronics are roughed up and fighting to protect the Mangle. Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica come through the main door and you have to put on the Bonnie mask next to you to trick them. Foxy appears in the halls as well, but you don't put on the mask, but rather you have to flash him about 3 times to leave. Next up, Balloon Boy. Comes through the vents and steals your battery if he gets in. The marionette. Wind up the music box and you'll be fine. If it's left unwound, you die. Survive to 1:30 AM and you reach phase 2 against the Mangle. It has 3 parts to it. The main body, which appears on cameras. When it makes its way to the hall, you have to flash it a few times before it will go away. The owl tail it has, for some reason, goes in through the vents and makes a noise when it enters the office. Put on your mask to stop it from seeing you. Finally, the ghost herself. She appears on camera and we have to hold the flashlight on her on the cameras, because that also works for some reason, until she makes a noise and leaves. If she's left unchecked, she breaks cams one by one and eventually kills you. Your goal is to survive to 6 AM. If you survive this endeavor, the ghost and you go to the limbo zone where she tries to kill Paul Bear, but we save him by stabbing her, a ghost. Look, I didn't say this game's perfect. Finally, we get a bit of exposition about the closing and rebranding of juniors, and that's the end for normal people like me. There's also a custom night and a few modes, the most notable of which being the max mode, and I'm not a masochist and I have other shit to do, so thank you to Astral Spiff for letting me use his clips here. This mode has us get 35 fucking correct guesses, and you're not even allowed to miss one, cause one miss kills you. On top of all that, the animatronics and the ghost are on max difficulty, which is 20. This means they rarely stay still, and after you mark someone correctly, you have about a second before a new one is possessed. This makes it much harder because the animatronics tend to stay in the same room, which makes detecting who it is exactly really hard.
It took 30 minutes. Oh my god, it took 30 minutes. Holy shit, my heart.
Anyways, that's not all there is. There's also a seniors mode, which is also almost as hard as max mode, but instead of just being really brutal and long, it has 2 new dolls. Not animatronics, dolls. Remastered Wilbur and Buford box. Wilbur glitches your monitor with the worst virus of all, ads. These ads have a green bar at the bottom which upon filling up breaks your conveyor belt so you can't repair the animatronics. This is pretty brutal cause the ads appear very frequently. Buford on the other hand pops up somewhere in your office and speeds up the decay of the animatronic's stability. You have to boop him to get him away. Yes, boop him. Finally, that's all the game has on show in terms of gameplay. There's also an extras menu, but I won't be showing that as I think after beating the game, it's a nice reward to see the devs' progress and models and their stories. Now is my time to gush about this game. It's time to see why Juniors is actually so good. Firstly, the designs of the animatronics. Being less robot-y and more like ragdolls, they look much scarier and creepier than, for example, the security breach animatronics. Each has a new and insanely well-made design, out of which I think the marionette got it the best. It's so creepy with the facial features looking more like a human rather than a robot, so it makes me a bit sad because the marionette isn't seen much. All of them also have a withered form, which I didn't realize till looking at the extras menu. This withered form appears in the last night against the Mangle in the first stage. Mangle herself also has a really frightening design, and she is goddamn huge. She is as big as the goddamn office herself. And talking about the office, it also has a really cool and detailed look to it. From blueprints of the characters on the walls to various marketable items like plushies, clocks, and all kinds of things. It also has a whiteboard, which I found to be a cool detail, because it can remind you what you're supposed to be doing, and it doesn't get erased ever. The game also has a story which isn't spectacular, but it does what it needs to, which is set up the world, why we are here, and why the bots are possessed. In general, I think the game works really well in the FNAF scene because it makes Scott Cawthon's sit and survive gameplay more interesting, because it's not just sit and survive, it's sit, survive, and accomplish something. Having an objective also makes for a good adding of tension, because you aren't just waiting. You're actually doing something. I think this also adds to its replayability. So my conclusion for this game is, yeah, it's pretty good.